Hey, Mike with Nerd Problems Gaming here, the channel where we go through the good and bad of everything nerdy to make sure you spend your time on the best of the best. In today's video, I'll be doing a review of Castlevania 2, Belmont's Revenge, so let's get into it. So this game originally came out in 1991 on the original Game Boy, but since has been ported to the Castlevania collection that recently came out on various platforms like Nintendo Switch. And so I recently picked up a copy of the Castlevania collection, being that it's one of my favorite series. And while I do have most of the games on this collection, this was actually one of them that I didn't have, so I was excited to check it out and see how it holds up. Now, the storyline of this game follows Castlevania The Adventure, which was the first Game Boy Castlevania game that came out, and it follows that storyline and takes place 15 years later. So in that story, you play as Christopher Belmont, who takes on Dracula and defeats him, but Dracula turns into some sort of mist and escapes at the end of that game. And now, flash forward 15 years later, Christopher's son, Soleil, is coming of age, and the power of the Belmonts is being passed on to him so he can continue to fight the forces of evil in the future. But unfortunately, during this transfer of power, Dracula intervenes and turns Soleil's power against him and turns him to an evil demon to serve Dracula. And so Soleil helps Dracula regain his body and regain his castle to seek out revenge on the Belmonts. And so you once again take up the whip as Christopher Belmont to fight evil and defeat Dracula and save his son in this game. Now, with all that said, there's no way you would know any of that unless it's listed in the original instruction manual or you read the storyline that's listed on the Castlevania collection. Because as I played the game, there was almost virtually no story whatsoever as you played. And the first line of dialogue you encounter is in the second to last boss fight of the game. And the rest of the dialogue and storyline that's revealed, you don't find out until the end credits scene of the game. But with that backstory, it adds a little more interesting twist to the gameplay as you play. So the game's graphics are pretty simplified because you are playing on the original Game Boy, which didn't have a whole lot of graphical power going into it. So it's a little bit below, I would say, an NES style graphic. And then the color schemes were actually pretty limited as well. So unless you're playing on like a Super Game Boy or you're playing on this Castlevania collection that just came out, you are pretty limited on your options. But with the Castlevania collection, you can play in black and white, in kind of a orangish brown color, the original shades of green color, and then you can add some different backgrounds to the game as well. The gameplay is also very similar to the classic NES style Castlevania games, where you do have your whip that you carry with you, and it has the 3 stages of the whip. But in this Game Boy version, it's a little bit different, where you start with the leather whip, you'll upgrade to a full-length chain whip, but then your 3rd level upgrade is actually a chain whip that shoots out a fireball. And so that's actually kind of unique to the Game Boy games, where the other Castlevania games don't necessarily have that fireball shooting ability in the whips. In this version of the game as well, you are limited on the sub-weapons that you have in the game, where typically you're going to have a cross, a knife, the holy water, a clock to stop time, and an axe, where in this game you just have the holy water and the axe as sub-weapons. Now, that's not really a huge bad thing in the game, that you are limited to just 2 sub-weapons. It kind of makes it a little bit easier in the sense where you don't have to guess which one you need to be using at a given time, because there is only 2 options, and for the most part they both work just as well, depending on the level that you're in. Also, usually they tend to give you the weapon that you need for that specific part of the game. So if you switch to the new one that you pick up, it's not necessarily as devastating as it might be in other versions of the Castlevania series. Another thing I'll say is that a lot of the stages are actually pretty short, outside of maybe your first time as you're playing. You know, when you play the first time, you're probably going to be dying a lot, trying to figure out the patterns of various enemies and the puzzle elements during part of the stages. But once you get that down, the stages are very quick to get through. My most recent playthrough, it took me about 6 minutes per stage to go through, which obviously isn't a ton of time. Now, another interesting thing about this game is that you have a stage select screen where you can go to various different enemy castles and fight forces of darkness that are powering Dracula in this game. And so usually Castlevania games are pretty linear, where you just go from one stage to the next, but this is kind of unique where you can bounce between different stages depending on which one you want to take on first. You don't really get any bonuses for finishing one stage first over another though, so it doesn't really overall impact the gameplay to any large extent. But it is cool to have that option to choose from different stages. Each stage is also going to have your typical boss fight. You get to them, they have a life meter, you have your life meter, and then it's a battle to the death to figure out who's going to win. And so that stays pretty consistent across the overall Castlevania series in this game as well. I'll also say that while the stages can be short for the most part, they're also kind of easier to some extent than the other Castlevania games, because for the most part in most stages in this game, there's really only going to be one enemy on screen at a time. Where a lot of the other Castlevania games, like the NES games and the Super Nintendo games and many others in the series, you tend to have a lot of different enemies coming at you all at once that you're trying to fight and dodge and run away from depending on the situation. Where in this game, since I think it's limited a little bit by the Game Boy capacity, there's usually only one enemy on screen at a time. But again, it doesn't necessarily take away from the boss fights and the end fights, which are incredibly challenging and very hard and will probably take you a long time to get through, and a lot of deaths to figure out the different patterns and how to get past them. This game also has several different cool new mechanics that I didn't really play in other Castlevania games that I think are maybe unique to the Adventure series, or maybe even just this game as well. And so a lot of the enemies are new. They focus on a lot of the same patterns as some of the other monsters in the past, but because of some of the new mechanics, this game has even more unique monsters as well. So for example, there's like rolling eyeballs that come across the screen where if you attack them, they explode. And if they happen to be on a bridge or some kind of platform that can be destroyed, that platform also blows up and you could fall through to the bottom or another level that you could walk on. This game also has a cool feature of rope climbing. And so older Castlevania games, you typically would go through a door and then it would open and you'd go to the next area, where this one has ropes that go up and down and unlock new areas. And this also leads to different paths you can potentially take in a stage, where some you could go both up or down, and you're going to experience different parts of the level depending on what you choose. There's also some unique enemies that when they hit you, they reduce the power of your whip. Remember in other Castlevania games, where once you get that powered up whip, you kind of keep it through the whole game until you die. Or in this one, it has the potential to bring you back down to the weakest form of the whip, which makes these enemies extra challenging. Another cool mechanic that I liked in the game is they kind of have these rope wheels where the rope will be going up and down, and then they'll switch directions as you play. And so not only do you have to time it right, of climbing the rope, going the right direction that you want, but you have to jump across from rope to rope as you play. There's also a unique version of this with spiders, where they create spider webs as they climb down on the screen, and wherever you kill them, that spider web stays there, and then you can jump across various spider webs throughout part of the level. And so I like that aspect. That was pretty challenging to figure out in some parts of the game. And like I said, I don't think I'd seen that in other Castlevania games I've played in the past. Also, the music's pretty cool in this game. There's a lot of great tracks that hold up to typical Castlevania standards of having some of the best music in video games. And so even though it's on a Game Boy, it does have some great music to it as well. But overall, I really like this game. It's pretty challenging. Some of the stages are easy, but also some of the later boss fights are incredibly tough, and you'll really need to be on your game in order to beat this. So I definitely think it's a fun game worth picking up. And since you have the ability now to play it in the Castlevania collection, it makes it easier than ever to pick up a copy of this game. But let me know in the comments below if you've played this game, how you think it stacks up to other Castlevania games in the series. If you like the Game Boy ones or you hate them, let me know in the comments below. Guys, if you like this video, be sure to smash that like button, as it really helps out the channel. And if you haven't done so yet, be sure to subscribe and turn on the bell notifications to get the latest updates of new nerd videos we put out. And if you'd like to help us support the channel, pick out content and more, become a patron of ours at nerdproblemsgaming.com/Patreon. And if you'd like to plug into our live streams and Let's Plays we do on the channel, you can follow us at nerdproblemsgaming.com/Twitch. But once again, thanks for tuning in, and we'll talk to you more soon.